D2DNY, Real World HVAC Simplified. Today I'm going to show you how to wire up semi-hermetic compressor. This bad boy right here. I'm going to show you how to wire it up. In my situation, I do, this is a 460 volts unit. You can tell by the color coding. So that's the color coding for 460 volts, which is in this case high voltage. Or I guess in my case, that's high voltage. And other parts of the world, high voltage may differ. So again, this is the United States or in the US. High voltage is in this particular instance is 460. Now, one thing you can do, you can just look at the name tag of your compressor, and it will tell you what's what. I mean, it's saying that voltage is 230, 208, 230, and 460 volts, three phase. See right there. So obviously, high voltage will be 460, and low voltage is 208, or 230. Again, this is America. Here's the flag. The US, if you're based on where you are from, that may differ. So just check with your local settings. And this video is for beginners or pro. If you're a pro, perhaps you'll know how to do this already. Perhaps you don't. I'm doing the video anyways. If it's useful for you, if you find it useful, give it a like, thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe. So I'm gonna dig right into it. So when you receive one of these compressors, whether it's brand new or refurbished, typically if it's brand new, you will get a brand new cover. You see, this is an old cover from the old compressor because this one is refurbished. And this is what the instructions looked like. Instead of the actual compressor, if you was to get a brand new one, that's what you'll get. But in the refurbish, you get a plastic bag or a kit that has this in there, which pretty much shows the same thing. All right. So let me just bring this over here, show you what we have. So you get this piece of paper, you get these three plastic pieces, and then you get 4 copper strips, 4 pieces, as you can see. And then you get how many pieces of nuts is this? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's about 12 pieces of these brass looking nuts. And I've already have one of these compressor set up and wired up, so I'm gonna show you what it looks like finished. In my case, I am using the 460 volt option, and this is what it's supposed to look like if you're using high voltage. And high voltage for me in this scenario, I am in the US once again, is 460 volts, and that's the configuration. That's the finished product. That's it. These wires right here goes to my contactor, and these are my shunts. And I'm not using across the line, and I'm not using low voltage, high voltage. This is the setup right here. So let me show you what you'll do based on the instructions. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is pay attention to the orientation of the compressor. That's the suction side, right? The suction valve represented by this little right here, this little thing right here. And if I zoom in, it says that suction valve, service valve. So that's that valve right there. You could see clearly, you know, the orientation, the same orientation as the picture right here, which means that when you move down to the terminals, which is these right here, you can know that from on the left hand side, that's 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, and then in the middle you have 7, 8, 9, and then towards the right you have 4, 5, 6. So that's 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and that's in relation to the layout. This is the suction side of the compressor, our suction line, suction service valve. There it is over there, right there. Okay, zoom that in. Do you see that? Zoom back out, and there is the electrical section. There is the back where the heads are on the compressor, the discharge side, and so it shows right here on the layout. So based on the layout, towards my suction side, that's 4, 5, and 6. In the middle, 7, 8, 9, and all the way to your left, that's 1, 2, and 3. So let's just say we're going to configure this compressor for high voltage, as in my case. I showed you on the earlier. I have the other one over that side here wired up already for 460 volts. You will put the 3 shunts, these 3. You will take one, you go across here, and another one across here, another one across here, and then your power leads, which is right here, would be connected line 1, line 2, line 3. Doesn't really matter the orientation, simply because this is a reciprocating compressor, and unlike a scroll, it's not rotation sensitive or sensitive. You can just put it, line 1 down here or line 1 in the middle. It doesn't have to be properly lined up. And if you want to do it, you can do it, but for this compressor to work or operate, you don't have to have line 1 actually to the T1, and then line 2 to T2, and then line 3 to T3. Okay, so that would be if you're doing the high voltage. In this case, it's 460 volts, and it shows you here 460 volts how you do it. And once again, you will use your 3 shunts, 1, 2, 3, and you put those across 7, 4, 8, 5, 9, 6. All right, here you go. These two, and these 2. So let's move on to if you're using the port winding. Now, this compressor, because of its size and the inrush current or the lack rotor current, you have the ability to do this port winding start. If you're a pro, you may or may not know what it is. If you're a beginner, more than likely you won't know what is meant by across the line or port winding start. But if you want to use this right here is across the line, right? And this right here option is across the line. This right here in the middle, you're doing port winding, and port winding is only available if you're using low voltage. I mean, you don't 460 or high voltage, only across the line. Here's the port winding setup. So what you'll see, 4, 5, and 6 is shunted with this one piece right here. Okay, that's would go over here. Okay, that's where you put that if you're doing port winding start for low voltage. And then you would just take, so now with port winding start, as opposed to having 3 power wires only if you're doing across the line. So if you have a port winding setup, it would be 6 wires coming here. You'd have 6 wires and 2 contactors controlling this compressor for port winding startup. Now, those contactors wouldn't pull in exactly at the same time. They won't get energized exactly at the same time. If you see here, they tell you C1 or contactor number 1 goes to 1, 2, and 3. So those 3 wires off of contactor number 1 will go to terminal 1, 2, and 3, right? And then the other 3 wires from contactor number 2 would go to 7, 8, and 9. And all you'll be using in the port winding setup is this one piece of shunt right here. That's all you use. And then your other remaining 6 terminals, this will cover 3 of your terminals, which is 4, 5, and 6. The other remaining 6 terminals will be connected to your contactors. Again, contactor number 1, you know, the 3 wires leaving contactor number 1 will go to 1, 2, and 3, and the 3 wires leaving contactor number 2 will go to 7, 8, and 9. Now, this is important. Line 1, line 2, line 3 on contactor number 1 has to correlate to line 1, line 2, line 3 on contactor number 2. What do I mean by this? I'll show you. Okay, so here's a contactor. There's several contactors here. And let's just say we were doing port winding, and you know, over here we're going to feed into our compressor, right? 3 wires going to our compressor, right? For let's say terminal 1, 2, and 3. Let's say this was contactor number 1. Up top here is where the power comes in. Right here is the main power. It comes in right here. And let's just say this is line 1, line 2, line 3, and you bring it accordingly. Line 1, line 2, and line 3 on your contactor. For contactor number 1 for the port winding. Then let's say this is contactor number 2. You would have to then parallel line 1 to this terminal here, line 2 to the middle terminal, and line 3 to the outer terminal, just the way everything has to be in uniform. You can't have line 1, line 2, and line 3 here, and then over here you have line 3, line 2, line 1. You're asking for trouble right there. That will never work, because now the windings are going to have different rotation inside of the compressor. So it has to be the same rotation. So rotation doesn't really matter. The rotation on this compressor doesn't really matter unless you're doing port winding, whereas both contactor 1 or C1 and contactor number 2 or C2, they has to have the same phase when it comes to the input power. And so let's get back down here now. So when you look at the second 7, 8, and 9, there you'll see that L1 will go to 7 and L2 will go to 8. Let me zoom that in some more. You can see that it's a bit right there. L1, L2, L3. Okay. So L2 will go to 5. Mistake. L2 will go to 8. L3 will go to 9. Now, you can see that L1 and terminal 1 will share. Also, when you, based on your wiring, what you should have, L1 down here and terminal 7 should also share, and L2 and terminal 8 is share, right? And L2 over here and terminal 2 will be shared. And again, it doesn't have to be in the same order where line 1 goes up here to terminal 1, so long as the input on both of these contactors is in phase. All right, so you could flip this whole thing around and have L3 up top if you want. L3 goes up here, and then L2 can leave in the middle, and L1 goes down here. However, if you do that, you have to have the same has to be true for over here. You have to flip this as well down here. Okay, so that's how you'll do port winding. Let's move on to the low voltage. Okay, so now we're at the low voltage side, and in the low voltage side, our setup, which is in this case, it shows you 208, 230. You'll use your three-hole shunt, and you'll use all 3 pieces of your 2-hole shunts. All right, 2 holes, 2 holes, and 2 holes. So you'll use all of that, right? And you plus the 3 holes shunt as well. And so what you'll have is this right here. This will be over here. In any event, the 3 holes shunt only goes on 4, 5, and 6. And then you'll just shunt these right here together. All right, you shunt these right here together, like that. Okay, and then now you see where you connect your power, L1, L2, and L3. Again, in this case, it doesn't really matter. You could put L3 up here if you want, or L3 in the middle. It doesn't really matter, because it's a reciprocating compressor. Rotation not sensitive, unless you're comparing rotation between the 2 windings inside. because there's two separate windings, hence the reason why you have part windings option, hence the reason why you have all these goddamn terminals, because they want to give you the option for part winding. And so when you're doing the part winding option, both windings have to have the same rotation. Otherwise, you have one going clockwise. Let's say the first winding for C1 is going clockwise, and then you have the voltage line 1, line 2, or any two phases are line reversed on the C2. Then you have one winding going clockwise, the other one going counterclockwise, so it's going to cancel out, and the compressor is going to just pull a lot of amperage, probably blow your breaker or your fuse, and possibly burn itself out. So you got to be careful with that. Okay, when you're doing the port winding option, you have to make sure that your phases are in sync for both contactor 1 and 2. Now, with that said, contactor 1, you might ask, well, what's the whole point of the port winding if we got contactor number 1 to contactor number 2? They won't pull in simultaneously. Contactor number 1 will pull in maybe 1/10 of a milliseconds before contactor number 2. So you probably won't see it if you're watching. Let's say this was a part winding setup and this was contactor 1 and contactor 2. If you're looking at it with the naked eye, it will appear to you that they both pulled in simultaneously, but they didn't. Contactor 1 pulled in just a bit of a second before number 2. That's the reason for part winding. You started that way. You use less inrush or lock rotor for initial startup, and that's the reason for that. So I'm going to do a quick little overview once I have this one wired up. But again, it's going to look the same way as this one over here. This is a setup for 460. All right. So I'm just going to put these in quickly. Just put these in like that. Doesn't matter how you put them. Just going like that, you know. Sit them on there like that. Right? So you do that. They're sitting flushed. Then you want to grab some of your screws. Just run them down. Oh, and let me tell you what size socket I use for this one. Okay, so I'm using a 9/16 socket, 9/16. All right, there you go. And then that basically fits. Tighten them down, not too much. You don't want to break the plastic. First you untight, and then you use your socket. Don't go too crazy on that. Just want to hold the plastic in place so you can install your shunts and your power supply wires, and you know, you can lock those in. So long as they are snug, not too tight. You can see I'm just barely pulling on those. I'm not going crazy on it, just barely pulling on it. Make sure they're all snug, everything is nice and level and flat. That's it, you know. Very little torque. Alright, if you go too tight, you'll see these things start to bend. The plastic. This one's a little bit nuts. It's alright. Okay. So in my case, I will not be using this because I'm not doing part winding, nor am I doing low voltage. I'm doing high voltage. All right. So again, this only goes over here. I won't be using that. That's what I'll be doing. Boom. 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 All right. That's 460 volts, high volts. 60 volt, high voltage. Now there you go. Now these nuts on top, you want to make sure these are nice and tight. These are snugged. You know, give a nice little tug on that. Make sure these are tight. You know, make sure it's nice and tight, snug. Okay. So now these three will be L1, L2, L3. Once again, it doesn't have to be, you know, phase sensitive, because It is a reciprocating compressor. Now, if you were wondering, in the package, they send the exact number of bolts, nuts, I should say, that's needed, and it's 3, 6, 9, 9 pieces. So just in case you're working in an area where you could lose one or drop one is going to fall, just be careful, because then you know, you're in for some trouble. All right, so I have my wires landed now. You can see that, you know, line 1, line 2, line 3, and these wires goes right back up into my contactor. Those I'm going to be changing as well. It's a good practice when you install a brand new compressor, you put in a new contactor as well. Like this video, again, give it a thumbs up if it was useful, if you find value in it. You can share it. If you hadn't subscribed, subscribe. I do upload videos like this on a weekly basis. Real world, real HVAC, simplified. I'm adding refrigerant as I speak. I don't want to I got to put 22 pounds in this one, so I don't want to overcharge it. Yeah.